Two big headlines dominate today's Premier League transfer show. The first one coming from David Ornstein last night, who is just the governor when it comes to transfer news, isn't he? There's no build-up, no flirtation, no foreplay. Just rocks up, drops the transfer news, rides off into the sunset, and you don't know when you're going to see him again. It might be later today, might be tomorrow, might not be until next week. But one thing's guaranteed: when he does rock up, you better be paying attention because it's good news. He's a bit like Ghost in Power. If you watch Power, the TV series, fantastic. Missed out. Go have a watch. Go watch Power. He's a bit like Ghost. Just has that aura about him. Ornstein is Ghost when it comes to transfer news. Anyway, the news last night. Newcastle United have had a £45 million bid rejected for Anthony Elanga of Nottingham Forest. But I guess the big news is actually that Nottingham Forest didn't make a counter-offer. There was no, actually, our price is 70 million, get closer to that and we can talk. It was, Nottingham Forest said, no, we're not selling him, go away. Now, Newcastle pursued him 12 months ago. The offer was slightly less back then, but Almiron was included in the deal, so it's quite difficult to gauge how much Newcastle valued him at because there's a player involved in that transfer. But 45 million now, I don't think it's an insulting offer. I think it's a very fair offer for Anthony Elanga, but Nottingham Forest are in that position, which is we don't want to sell him, so we're not going to. I think both clubs are doing the right thing. I think Newcastle have identified a player who would be really good for them. 6 goals and 12 assists maybe last season for Nottingham Forest, a really good return, but someone that you would expect to get even better this season coming. I think he'd be a great fit for Newcastle in terms of how Newcastle play. Can play on the right or the left, which is good for Eddie Howe. He likes players that can play more than one position. It ticks all the boxes. Homegrown as well, still quite young. It's tick, 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 tick. Completely makes sense why Newcastle would target Elanga again. Now, they wanted him a year ago. Since then, Elanga's had a very good season at Nottingham Forest. It makes sense. But also Nottingham Forest are doing the right thing, which is no, we don't want to sell him. 45 million doesn't tickle our fancy. I do think if Newcastle went back with larger offers, eventually they would start to listen because every player has their price. I truly believe that. Whether you're a Newcastle fan, Isak has a price. Forget what Sky Sports are doing. I don't like how Sky Sports have gone about the Isak thing in the last, what feels like 6 months now. But if a club rocked up and said 200 million, I think Newcastle would go, all right, the thing is no one's going to pay 200 million. So he's pretty safe at St James's Park. And that's with Elanga. If Newcastle rocked up and said 80 million, I'm pretty sure Nottingham Forest suddenly go, hang on a minute, we might take this. So he does have a price, just Forest are saying, no, we're not selling. It's a good stance to take. Newcastle now have the decision to make, which is, do you go back in for him? Because I don't think 45 million is insulting. It's an opening offer, and almost no matter what Newcastle offered, it was probably going to be rejected. If they rocked up with 60 million, Forest would say, no, you're not getting him for that. Because they would know Newcastle ain't... No one goes in with a top offer, right? I think that's a fair thing to suggest. So Forest will fully be aware that Newcastle's opening bid, they've got a bit more than that. They're happy to pay more than that for Elanga. It's not a one bid and that's it. It's just whether Newcastle want to spend that extra 20 million that it might take to get out. I think 70 million is what you'd have to pay. But that's where I think it starts to become bad value. I think he's worth 70 million to Nottingham Forest. I don't think he's worth 70 million to Newcastle United. Hopefully that makes sense. They're also being linked to Semenyo of Bournemouth. Good player, but I've always thought he's perhaps should be doing more. I think Semenyo should be providing more goals and assists at Bournemouth than what he currently does. Price tag of 70 million. Now that's chunky. But one thing we do know is Bournemouth are willing to sell anyone this summer. Kerkez is gone. We're just waiting for him to be announced at Liverpool. Howson's gone. Zabarni's been strongly linked to PSG. Although Bournemouth are trying to play hardball there, you get the feeling that if PSG want him, they'll get him. And I think that's the case with Newcastle and Semenyo. It's just 70 million feels bad value for me. Also linked to Mohamed Kudus. Now, I think taking McLaren blue specs off as best I can, I think this would be a fantastic move for Newcastle and Kudus. I think he would excel under Eddie Howe. I think his best position is out on the right, which he can't play at West Ham because we've got Jared Bowen in that position. And I would prefer to see Bowen there than Kudus. But I think he would displace Murphy. And I think you maybe see what West Ham were trying to buy. We've seen glimpses of Kudus at his best at West Ham, but we've not seen it for a consistent period of time. And I'm kind to Kudus. I blame all three managers. He was best under Moyes, but I still don't think Moyes got the best out of Kudus. But I always felt that was impossible. Could you get the best out of Bowen, Kudus and Lucas Paqueta at the same time? I've always felt you can't do that. There's too much conflict of interest on all three players. Someone's playing out of position. At least one of them is. So the question for me was always, can you at least get the best out of two of them and the third one do all right? And I think we did that generally under Moyes. But under Lopetegui, it wasn't good. It was a disaster. And under Potter, it's not been good enough either. So I'm going to give Kudus the benefit of the doubt because I'm quite confident if he gets his move right. And West Ham want to sell him. It's not even like we're willing to sell him. We have a desire to sell him because we need funds in this summer so we can bring our own players in. 65 million is the price tag. I think that's good value. I think that's a good signing for Newcastle. And I think it would be a good move for Mohamed Kudus as well. So it's one of those, watch this space. Right, from St James's Park down to the Emirates, Arsenal being linked to Brentford defensive midfielder Christian Nørgaard, who may or may not be replacing an unnamed footballer in the Premier League. His contract's coming to an end with Arsenal and they've tried to negotiate a new deal but failed to do so, so he's leaving. So Zubimendi's gone into Arsenal, which is the longest ever deal that I've seen to finalise. But they still need another replacement because Jorginho left. Now, I'll be honest with you, did not know he had left so soon. Watched the Club World Cup and Jorginho rocked up. Hang on a minute, where is it? How's he here already? Apparently there was an agreement so he could go play for them. I like that, though. I like it when clubs show that respect to the player, which is we're not going to stand in your way. If anything, we're going to help you because of what we've got from you and because of how good a servant you've been, how professional you've been. We're going to show that back so that we're going to help you go and get the move you want. So Jorginho's left, Partey's leaving, Zubimendi's going in. They still need someone else. Christian Nørgaard, 31 years of age. It's not ideal in terms of an age profile, but just 11 million euros. So what's that, 9-10 million pounds? I think that's a good signing. It's not someone you're going to be selling and making money on. That's not what's happening. They're paying 10 million to get someone in that's a bit of a stopgap for 2-3 years, provide cover for that area of the pitch, and I think it's a fantastic signing. Ideally, you want to bring in younger players who you can improve and that you can potentially sell on for profit in future, but you can't do that with every single player in your squad. Well, you can do, but I think sometimes you do need that experience. You do need to get the older players, the cheaper players, and what you're buying, you're not looking at as a project or a financial investment. You're looking at someone that's going to come in, do a job for now, and then at the end of it, he goes with our thanks, a bit like Jorginho. And I think Nørgaard was superb at Brentford last season. Damsgaard got all the plaudits, understandably so. I gave him all the plaudits as well. He was fantastic. But actually, Nørgaard was very, very reliable in midfield, a fantastic player. And there was a game last season, I think it might have been PSG, the home game at the Emirates, PSG, where Declan Rice had to move into that number 6 role because there wasn't any alternative. Because Partey, I might be getting this bit muddled up here, but I think Partey picked up a stupid booking in Madrid, and it meant he missed the first leg against PSG, which was at the Emirates. So Declan Rice had to do the number 6 role, and it just killed Arsenal. It absolutely killed their midfield completely. Odegaard started. I think Marino might have been the other midfielder that night. It just didn't work. They were stale. There was no energy. There was no driving runs. And they completely missed Declan Rice and what he brought to that midfield. And I think next season, Arsenal cannot afford to be in a position where they have to use Declan Rice as that number 6. You don't want to be doing that. You want to keep him as that number 8. Keep him doing those charging runs from that left channel that he's been doing. And he's forming a really good partnership with Lewis Skelly at left back, because often you'll see Lewis Skelly jump into midfield and Declan Rice pull out wide left. It causes all sorts of problems for the opposition's midfield. What do? Do you go out wide with Declan Rice, or do you stay with Lewis Skelly? Now, it's not that Declan Rice goes out on the left wing and plays as a winger. He just drifts when Arsenal are building up in the back. Declan Rice will often peel off to the left a little bit, let Lewis Skelly come into that number 6 role, and usually one of them ends up finding space in there, and it's easy to break the first press then. But to do that, you've got to make sure you've got 2 really good number 6s. And Zubimendi, I don't know enough about him. He looks good for Spain, that's all I can say. But with Christian Nørgaard, I think they're getting a very, very good standard all Premier League player. It sounded like I was playing. He's brilliant at what he does. I think this is a very, very clever signing for Arsenal. I think Elanga would be a clever signing for Newcastle. I think Kudus would be a clever signing for Newcastle. I think Semenyo would be a chunky one. Kerkez is a brilliant signing for Liverpool. And Nørgaard to Arsenal, it's a big yes for me. Anyway, there you go. That's today's biggest headlines around the Premier League. Let me know what you think of all the transfer rumours that you've seen. Any that you've seen that I've not mentioned you want to discuss, get involved in the comments. Don't be shy, and I will catch up with you tomorrow.